There we go. Oops. Okay, well, I don't really have to do too much here because Adele pretty much covered it all. But yes, my name is Jessica. I work for Florida Fish and Wildlife. I am part of the FWC Lionfish Control Team. So mainly I do strictly lionfish. And with FWC, I joined in November of last year, and I handled most of the education and outreach stuff. So a lot of stuff like what I'm doing here, presenting. I do work with students too, and I go to schools and present, and we do a lot of dissections and everything like that. And I'll actually get into that a little bit more later on in the presentation. But it's just me and one other girl in our program, so we kind of run the whole program together. But yes, I grew up in Minnesota, a small town right on the South Dakota border. I moved down to Pensacola, Florida in 2014. No. Yes, 2014 to go to school for marine biology. And I graduated in 2016 with my bachelor's degree in marine biology from the University of West Florida here in Pensacola. All right, and so today I'm going to talk to you about the lionfish invasion in Florida. So my team, the Lionfish Control Team, I'm part of the Division of Marine Fisheries Management. So the Division of Marine Fisheries Management pretty much handles a lot of the, like obviously lionfish, but we do a lot of the outreach, like mainly saltwater, it's marine fisheries. So we do a lot of the outreach and education, a lot of the artificial reefs, and any like saltwater regulations and rules. And then just a quick little bit about lionfish, our topic of tonight. I am going to go into all of these things into detail, but just to kind of go over them briefly here, lionfish are originally, they are native to the Indo-Pacific. They were introduced into Florida waters around the 1980s off of Dania Beach, and we're pretty sure that they were released from an aquarium. It was not through the ballast water from ships, you know, like transporting back and forth. We do believe it was the aquarium release. They released about 118 lionfish into Florida waters. And so since then, since the 1980s, lionfish have become established all throughout, you know, the Atlantic coast, throughout the entire Gulf of Mexico, down into the Caribbean, and they do continue to spread. They have a very high reproductive output, which I will get into in a little bit more, but they, you know, they reach sexual maturity very early, and they reproduce more often than most fish. They eat pretty much anything they can find. Right now, they don't have any sort of natural control mechanism. There is no like natural predator here in Florida waters that sees lionfish as prey. And one of the reasons is because of their unique coloration. Lionfish are very bright, and they're red, and they have stripes, and they have these huge fins that stick out. And normally, you know, in the animal world, if there is an animal or something that, you know, displays very bright colors, it usually means that they are dangerous. If they display those bright colors, it's usually like a warning sign saying, hey, I'm venomous, poisonous, I will hurt you. And so lionfish do have this, you know, colorful display, and that really deters some of our like natural predators here in Florida waters from looking at them as a prey item. And then here, their populations here are much larger than they are seen in their native range. They're just a boring reef fish in their native range. They don't have much of an impact on the reefs like they do in our waters here. So real quick, lionfish are invasive, obviously. So just to cover what an invasive species is, it is an organism that was brought into a new region by people, and it has a negative impact on the environment. So just a couple examples of different invasive species that I'm sure you guys have heard of too is the Burmese python down in the Everglades. That is a big issue. Hey, you guys are kind of close to there. So yeah, you probably like know all about it. And then hydrilla. Hydrilla is it's an aquatic plant, freshwater, but it can grow very quickly, feet within a day. So, and it tends to spread. very quickly, and it blocks sunlight. You know, it makes boating very difficult, and it can reduce the oxygen levels in water. And then the last one is kudzu. This is native to like Asia, Southeast, East Asia. And it's basically a very fast growing vine, and it covers anything in its path. So the difference between invasive and non-native, so an invasive species is a non-native species, but a non-native species doesn't actually mean that it is invasive. So a non-native species is something that was brought to a new region that wasn't like natively there. And then for it to become invasive, it has to have that negative impact on the environment. And here it says a non-native species is not established, whereas like an invasive species is established. What we mean by established is just that, you know, it has made this new environment its home, and it has successfully, it has started to successfully reproduce and like inhabit this new environment. And then quickly here, this is just an invasion trend that we tend to see in a lot of invasive species. So as you can see, we have this introduction phase. This is, you know, when a new species is introduced to the new environment. You don't really see much of it. You know, you probably don't even know that it's there. And if you do notice it, you don't see an impact that it's really having on that environment until they start reproducing and using their resources. And that's where we have this rapid growth phase. And that's when, you know, with lionfish, we started to see hundreds and hundreds of lionfish in one area. And then they reach this hump, and we're suspecting up here at the top of the hump is probably where, you know, they run out of resources. Their populations are too large. There's not enough for them to eat because they've eaten everything. There's not enough space. And then this short decline happens because they're probably dying off a little bit. And, you know, cannibalism could be kind of associated with this as well. And then eventually the population will level off, and it will reach its carrying capacity. And so a carrying capacity is just when a population is as large as it's going to get with its available resources. And when I first started working at FWC, we were guessing that the lionfish populations were probably in that short decline phase, because over the past couple years, we were seeing less lionfish, but we do have one of our big, incentive programs going on right now, and we are seeing a ton of lionfish. It seems like the populations are starting to come back. So we don't know, we don't know if this means, if this is the leveling off phase or what exactly it means, but we are, you know, noticing bigger populations and more lionfish, and in areas where we weren't seeing them as often. So there are 41 other non-native marine fishes in Florida, and 5 of them have become established, but none of them have had a negative impact on their environment like the lionfish has. So just to, you know, throw out a couple, the yellow tang is not native to Florida waters. And that one far on the right, that's a new invasive fish that we are really starting to see. They came up from the Indo-Pacific as well, and that's the regal damsel. I don't know if you guys would be seeing them down there or not, but I know up here not up here in the Gulf, but in the Gulf, we're starting to see them. I don't know if they've made it quite up to Pensacola yet, but we are starting to see them a little bit more down in the southern reefs. So keep your eyes open. The way you can tell, and I don't know if you can tell, but they've got this little white dot back here on the back of their dorsal fin. That's supposed to be how you know. That's like the identifying factor. But yeah, lionfish are, you know, the worst marine invasion to date. So this graph, I'm going to show you a series of graphs really quick here. I haven't started it yet, but just notice there is a little dot down here. This is down in Dania Beach. This is when lionfish were first starting to be observed. It doesn't mean that this was the year that they got introduced. This was just the beginning of when we really started to notice the populations. And so as these maps progress, just kind of take a look at the spread of the red dots. So it goes to 1990, 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010, 2018, 2019. So over, 40 years, lionfish have spread all throughout the Gulf of Mexico, down into the Caribbean, all up along the Atlantic coast. We aren't seeing them, well, so I'll get into their habitat preferences here in just a moment, but lionfish prefer warmer waters. They can be in colder waters, but not super cold. So we are seeing them up, north in Rhode Island, up that way. But we're guessing it's not for the entire year. The waters definitely get a little too cold up there for them to live there throughout the year, but they're probably migrating and moving their way up there. And I think we're gonna do some questions here real quick if anyone has any questions.
Jessica, right now, let's see. John Edmonds has a question. Why does the FWC feel certain the lionfish invasion all started in Dania Beach?
That's a good question. There is an article that suggests that that's where the release was, the aquarium release. I don't have that article handy. I can find it. But that is where they believe that the aquarium release happened. And so that's kind of where, like I said, that's like starting site that year doesn't mean that that was the first time a lionfish was ever spotted. That's just like the records that we have, the first one that was reported to us. So, yeah.
And the only other thing that was being discussed, Eddie Lim had come on and said that he had a dive in Bonaire and he had seen a big green eel come out of nowhere that swallowed the lionfish he had, that he had speared. And he was just wondering first of all, do green moray eels like lionfish, or and is that a new behavior for an eel? I don't know if you can answer that, but that's what's come up that's what's being discussed.
I don't know. I've heard of sharks and grouper and stuff like that eating lionfish. And a lot of people always suggest that when we're harvesting lionfish, once you spear one, to like feed it to the sharks and teach them how to eat lionfish, which we do not condone, by the way. But I have not heard of eels doing that. I feel like if you kill a lionfish, you kill any fish and it's there and it's dead, something will eat it if it's available to them. So that's very interesting. I have not heard of an eel doing that before. They can get big. That's scary.
And Jeannie has a question. What does a natural control mechanism in invaded range mean? One of your slides has this as a bulleted item.
Yeah, so that just means that there is nothing in their invaded range, so like in Florida waters, that that keep their populations under control. So, like most fish have a predator that eats them. And lionfish just don't really have that here in Florida waters. They don't have a natural predator here that is going to keep their populations under control, or many diseases, whereas like most of the time there are specific diseases associated with fish or corals or something that helps like keep those populations under control. We did see a couple years ago, we had a very big like lesion outbreak on lionfish. They're not sure what caused it. If it was, I think they think it's bacterial, but they're not exactly sure. I think UF is doing a bunch of research on the lesions, the lionfish lesions, but that actually did have a fairly decent impact on our lionfish populations. That was like the first thing besides humans that we've noticed that have helped kind of kill off some of the lionfish populations. But essentially that's what it means, is that there's just no natural predator here that keeps their populations in check.
Okay. Michael has sent something. He has seen red snappers swallow lionfish. Are other fish not susceptible to the lionfish venom?
That I don't know the answer to that question. I've wondered that too. I can't imagine that they're not, but you know, it doesn't kill you. The venom is not like deadly. It hurts very bad and it can be very painful and you can get very sick, but it does affect at least humans. It affects everyone differently. So I would assume, you know, if it might have a similar effect on fish, but it might not have the same effect on them.
Okay, we're going to close the Q&A for now, and we'll have another session right toward the end.
Yes. Yeah, and I'll cover some of the stuff we just talked about too in the next few slides. So
Thank you.
yeah. All right, so here we'll talk about lionfish habitat. So lionfish can be found, you know, pretty much anywhere where there is some sort of structure. They do prefer structure. We see them over sand sometimes, but it's not very often. So you're going to find them a lot of the time on coral reefs or any sort of artificial reef. They have been seen in mangroves, seagrass beds, estuaries, and even like on ledges. They don't have a depth preference. Like I said, we've been seeing them in all sorts of different depths and habitats. So they can be in very shallow water coral reefs, or they can be on deep ledges. So they have been seen at up to 1,000 feet deep. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen some of the videos, but they take, you know, those big like submersibles down and they'll go down to like 600-700 feet and they'll be seeing lionfish hanging out on the reefs down there. And like I had mentioned before, temperature, they do prefer warmer waters because they are, you know, a tropical fish, but they have been seen in waters as low as 50 degrees, which is why we're probably seeing them up along the northern Atlantic coast. They have a wide salinity tolerance, which is kind of, shocking because, you know, most fish are either they're a saltwater fish, freshwater, or brackish. There are a few that you see that range between the two, but it's usually like a seasonal change. Whereas lionfish, we are seeing them in the ocean, and then we're seeing them in the mouth of a river, which is almost freshwater. So with them having a high site fidelity, what that means is that they don't really tend to migrate very often. Once a lionfish has found a good home, they're going to probably stay there. You know, when they found a reef or a structure of some sort that they like and there's food, they are going to spend most of their life there. And then a demersal species, lionfish are demersal. That just means that they tend to hang out on the bottom. You won't see a lionfish swimming around in the water column. You will see them usually down on the bottom and then on some sort of structure. They like to hide in little crevices or under ledges. And lionfish reproduction. So lionfish are very interesting when it comes to their reproduction habits. So they can reach sexual maturity within the first year. And most fish, you know, it takes a good few years for them to become sexually mature. Lionfish can spawn up to every 4 days. And every time they spawn, they lay this egg sac that can hold up to 30,000 eggs. And that might seem like a lot because like 30,000 eggs, wow, that's crazy. But Most fish do lay right around the same number of eggs. It's just with a lot of other fish, you know, they have a very, like with the coral spawning, corals spawn once a year. A lot of fish are the same way. They spawn once or twice a year, and they have to have the perfect conditions. It has to be, you know, the right moon, the right tide, the right temperature, the right time of day. Whereas lionfish, they don't have any of those preferences. They do prefer the warmer months. So we usually see lionfish spawning happening during the warmer months more than the winter months. But they can spawn every 4 days. So their egg sacs, which you can see in the bottom left picture, it's a gelatinous mass full of eggs. And so what lionfish do is the female will release this egg sac and the male will fertilize it. And then the egg sac will reach the surface, float up to the top because it does float. And then it just floats along. And it eventually, you know, the lionfish larvae will hatch and then they'll settle down onto the bottom. And that's where they probably spend a decent amount of the rest of their life. And then we talked about spines. I think it was Dave, right? Dave had, you know, talked about the lionfish sting. So lionfish have 18 venomous spines. They have 13 dorsal spines, which are like on their back. They have 2 pelvic spines. So the pelvic fins, you know, are like the ones up here. They have 1 spine on each fin. And then they have 3 spines on their anal fin. And so lionfish spines are not hollow like you would think like a snake's fang. They actually have a ridge or a groove on the side, and that's where the venom is housed. So when you get stung by a lionfish, what happens is there's a fleshy material on the outside of the spine, which you can see, you know, it's the same as like the skin on their side. And what happens is when you get stung or poked, that skin, that tissue gets pushed back, and then the venom is released into your skin. And it is a neuromuscular toxin. You know, like he mentioned before, it can hurt. It hurts really bad, but it does affect everyone differently. Some people, you know, just swell up, and some people get very sick and need to seek real medical attention. It really just depends on who you are and how you can handle the lionfish venom. I know one guy who, he's really big in the lionfish world, and he has been stung by lionfish so many times now that he is absolutely allergic to them, and he can't even touch a lionfish without like completely breaking out. So I don't know what causes that, but be careful. So no one has died from a lionfish sting, which is good. So the venom in the stings are not deadly. And then if you ever are stung by a lionfish, what we recommend is to apply heat. So, you know, either soak your hand, arm, whatever in hot water, or we do, you know, recommend heat packs, and we always carry heat packs with us on the boat. And then if it's really bad, you know, seek medical attention, because the effects of a lionfish sting can last up to a week or 2. And then real quick, just to clarify, the difference between venomous and poisonous. A lot of people do not know the difference. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I did not before this started. Before I started with FWC, I kind of thought they were the same thing. But lionfish are venomous. So if something is venomous, it means that you have to be like, well, you know, poked, stabbed, punctured. It has to puncture the skin and get injected into your system. Whereas if something is poisonous, you have to ingest that or absorb it. So like poison ivy. But whereas if something's venomous, it has to puncture your skin for it to have an effect. And so lionfish are venomous, not poisonous, which is another reason, or another thing we really like to make sure people know, because you are able to eat lionfish. So they are not poisonous because they don't have anything in their meat. And then just to cover, the anatomy of a lionfish. So up here, we've got the dorsal spines, the 13 venomous spines. And then back here, number 2 is going to be their dorsal fin. 3 is their tail or their caudal fin. 4, these are the pectoral fins. Those are the big, beautiful ones that you see on the side of the fish. Those do not have any spines, so those ones are actually safe. A lot of people, are usually think that they have the spines as well, and those are the ones that you have to look out for, but those ones are actually okay. But that just goes with their, more scarier look as well. And then 5 is going to be those pelvic spines. There's 1 on each of their pelvic fins, and then 6 is their pelvic fins. 7 is going to be those 3 anal spines, and then 8 is their anal fin. And then to cover what lionfish prefer to eat, anything. Lionfish do not have much of a preference, which is what makes them their, feeding habits so invasive and detrimental to our native populations. Lionfish don't get to be super big, but they can eat fish up to half their like body size. Which is pretty insane for, a fish to do. I mean, that would be like us eating never mind. They can eat just about anything, and they don't have much of a preference. They are opportunistic generalists is what they're called. And so this just means that they will eat anything whenever they have the opportunity to. And so how lionfish usually eat, I don't know if you've ever seen it. If you get the chance to look up like a video of a lionfish feeding, you should definitely do it. It is so cool. But what they do is they fan out those pectoral fins, which are the ones on their side, and they kind of corner their prey. And then lionfish have their jaw extends. So what they do is, and it is a split second, it is the fastest thing ever. Like even in slow motion, it is still super fast, but their jaw moves so fast and it protrudes out, and that protrusion creates like a sucking motion with their prey, and it pulls the prey right in and they swallow it completely whole. I have had a pet lionfish, I guess, and they will eat themselves so full to where you can see the fish moving in their stomach, and they will have a fish like hanging out of their mouth because they're trying to eat everything that they possibly can, even if they have no room for it. And lionfish, they will eat themselves to death because they'll eat anything that's in sight. And so a couple of the reasons that this is so detrimental to our populations is that lionfish eat a lot of very important fish species. So this is going to be, like our economically important ones, the ones that you're going to see on your dinner table or when you go out to a restaurant, snapper, grouper, lobster, crabs. But then they also have a very big ecological impact. So lionfish are mainly a reef fish. They like structure. So on coral reefs, they're going to be eating, the cleaners, the cleaning wrasses, the little shrimp, or the grazers like juvenile parrotfish, the ones who eat the algae off of the reef to keep the reef healthy. And since they don't have much of a preference, they will eat pretty much anything that gets in their way. And then, like I said, they are opportunistic generalists. They don't have much of a preference. They reduce recruitment and prey biomass. So basically what that means is by preying upon mainly juvenile fish, since they aren't that big, they reduce the chance of juvenile populations to grow up and join adult populations and start reproducing. And we will start to see smaller sizes of these larger fish because there aren't as many juveniles growing up to be adult fish. Lionfish tend to outcompete a lot of natural predators or larger fish on reefs. There will be a video at the end that I will be showing, and you can see there's not barely a single other fish on this reef. It is mainly completely inhabited by lionfish. And then, you know, this causes, so if they're in a coral reef environment and they eat all of the fish in that environment, those coral reefs are not going to be able to survive because they will become algal dominated and overgrown, and then lionfish will move on and nothing will be there. And so that's why we created the lionfish program in the first place, because the only real predator that we have seen to do anything successfully are humans. So this graph, I know it's a graph, but you don't have to worry about the numbers. It just kind of shows the different ways that you can harvest lionfish. And so the dark blue that you see the most of, that is going to be scuba diving. That is our main effort for removal, is diving, and I'll get into how to harvest lionfish in just a second. But also, you know, there has been some trap work being done. It hasn't been very successful. Some people are using modified lobster traps, which are catching lionfish, but the numbers are just not significant enough compared to the amount of bycatch that they're catching. Because lionfish, you don't really catch them on hook and line. It has been done, it has happened, but it's just not significant enough to make an impact on the populations. So, to harvest lionfish, it is pretty easy. You do have to be a diver, which all of you are. So, or well, I guess most of you, I don't know. But you don't need much for equipment because lionfish don't move very much. They're not very fast. You don't need a big pole spear. They're not, you know, they're not like very big. So you can just use a small like handheld pole spear. And then some sort of lionfish containment unit. We use the zookeeper as our lionfish containment unit, but you can also use a net if you are trying to catch lionfish. They don't swim very fast, and they don't see us usually as predators either, so they don't have that like alert factor, you know, like most fish do. When you swim up to them, they swim away. Lionfish don't tend to really do that. And then they do make puncture resistant gloves. So if you are worried about being stung, I definitely, you know, we recommend you wear the puncture resistant gloves just because it is a lot easier to get stung by a lionfish than you would think. And then just some of the regulatory rules that FWC has put into place. There aren't many, thankfully. So normally for fishing, most fishermen have to have some sort of a fishing license. And there is no license required to harvest lionfish as long as you are using lionfish harvesting equipment. So like the pole spear or a Hawaiian sling or a net. There is no size limit, there is no bag limit, and there is no season. Well, season is all year round. So you can go and harvest lionfish pretty much anywhere, anytime, and get as many as you want. There are certain areas where spearfishing is prohibited, and so that means that spearfishing for lionfish is prohibited as well. But FWC and Reef and NOAA will issue specific permits for some of these different areas and to allow people to harvest lionfish. So I know we had this talk a little bit earlier. We will always, allow or will provide permits for like different tournaments. And, you know, especially with you guys down in the Keys Marine Sanctuary is obviously all protected, but there are ways to get permits to spearfish in those areas. And then I guess using rebreathers was not allowed at one point. I don't know all the details about it, but you are allowed to use them now to spear lionfish. And I think we'll take some more questions now.
Okay, Jessica. What's the most effective treatment when you get stung?
So hot water would be the best. So what happens is, I forgot to mention this before, hot water or heat pack, heat of any sort is best. So their venom is a neuromuscular toxin. It is a protein. And so basically what the heat does is it denatures that protein. You will still have pain and you will still see side effects, but it will the heat will at least lessen those effects of the lionfish venom. But heat is definitely, obviously if a spine is stuck in you, to remove the spines. I know that has happened to a few people.
And by heat, do you mean hot water, or can it be a heating pad? I mean, if you're...
Yep, either one. Hot water, if you have hot water available. Obviously, if you're out on a boat, you probably don't.
Right.
But so what we do is, and I'm sure lots of places make them, but Zookeeper makes hot pads or heat packs. And we carry a bunch of those on the boat with us. And they're kind of like an ice pack, you know, where you activate it and then it gets cold. It's the same concept, but with heat. Okay,
cool. Do you happen to know what the life expectancy is for a male and a female?
They don't live crazy long, but they probably, I'm trying to remember, I know their size. I think because they reach sexual maturity so early, they probably don't live, I don't know how much age work has been done with them, but I think that they live to be around like 30 to 40 years, and that's probably max. But the largest ones ever like observed and recorded in Florida waters is about 19 inches in length. And in their invaded range, they usually only get to be about 15 or 16 inches in length. Native range. I don't know what I just said. Did I say invaded? Native. In their native range, they're usually like 15 to 16 inches, but we're seeing them a lot larger in the invaded range here. So like up to 19 inches.
Okay. And the last one I have for you is a question from me. You said that it all started, or the biggest volume of lionfish were at Dania Beach. Is that still true?
So what that was, is that's where we first noticed them, and that's where they believe they were released from the aquarium at. So I wouldn't say that the largest populations were ever down there. That's just kind of where the population first, you know, started growing and spreading. We had, you know, it seemed like the Panhandle was kind of the hot spot for lionfish. We were seeing most of our lionfish up in the Panhandle, like the northern Gulf of Mexico. But this year we're seeing a lot on the East Coast, and actually a lot on the Southeast Coast over by you guys. So I don't know if that's just because more people are going out and harvesting over there. But like I said, you know, we did see a little bit of a decline in populations, and the populations in the Gulf of Mexico had definitely decreased, but they are starting to increase again. And I'm assuming that the ones on the East Coast are as well, which is not good.
Okay, well, let's see, one more. Let's see. The highest estimates reporting over 1,000 lionfish per acre. Is that right?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
Okay.
I would not be surprised. In the video that I show at the very end, you guys will see there's at least 100 lionfish on this small little like scrap of, I think it's a plane or something. So I would not be surprised by that. At least at one point, densities were probably that high. I think they are less now than they were before, but I would definitely believe that they were that high at one point. Okay,
we're going to make you laugh a little bit.
Oh, good.
Okay, someone would like to know what your favorite way of eating lionfish would be. Blackened, grilled, or sushi. And thank you so much for sharing with us. We really, really enjoyed everything that all of your slides and all the information you provided.
Oh, yeah, of course. I really like Lionfish Ceviche.
Oh,
That's my thing.
yeah, John got it.
Yeah. But yes, sushi too. I'm a big sushi fan. But pretty much anyway, lionfish it's delicious. And I actually have a slide coming up that I don't have any recipes for you guys. I know you asked me for recipes, but I have something else, so it might be okay. But now I lost my train of thought. Oh, I'm so sorry. See, my dog just freaked out because somebody got home. I'm so sorry. Oh, she's been laying by the door this whole time. Yeah, I will eat lionfish pretty much anyway. It's good. It's a white flaky fish. It's very light. It's got good flavor. A lot of people compare it to like grouper or hogfish. So it's a tasty fish. If you ever get the chance to try it, you definitely should. All right, and so now I am going to talk about all of the different programs that we offer with FWC. Some of these might interest some of you guys as well. So we offer a bunch of different types of programs. So we do have programs that are, catered towards divers and removing lionfish, of course. But then we also have our educational programs and our outreach that we do. And so that's, like what I'm doing here tonight. And then we also really try to encourage people to eat lionfish and sell lionfish commercially because there is a commercial market for them. And they, like I said, they do taste good. And so since, 2014, just through our programs, we've removed almost 700,000 lionfish. And that's just up through 2019. We are over halfway through 2020. So we're probably up past that 700,000 number now. So one of our big things, that we do, and like I said, I do a lot of the outreach and education. We have our Be the Predator booth. So what we do is we take this to different events, festivals, any sort of fishing tournament or lionfish tournament, of course, we set up there and we get to interact with the public and the community and talk to people and tell them about lionfish. And then, we have all of our fun little promo items and brochures and pamphlets and stickers, etc. And if we could have done this in person, I would have brought them all to you. So if you have a way to distribute them, I would be happy to send you a box of stuff. So we can talk about that another time. But yeah, if you guys would like that, I would be happy to do that for you. You get a little feel of our Be the Predator booth. And then we do this thing called classroom invasion. And so this is where, I'll go into a classroom and I will present to students and then conduct a lionfish dissection with them. And it is so much fun. They get to cut open their own lionfish. And usually what we do is we focus on the stomach content. So we'll have them cut the stomach out and cut it open and look through it and see if there are any full-sized fish or, what they've been eating. And we have seen some pretty cool things. We also will, we've got teacher workshops that we do. So we'll, kind of teach teachers how to host their own lionfish lesson. And then with that, we have a bunch of different resources. So we've got lesson plans, books, materials, games. We have all sorts of things for us to present, but also for educators to do their own kind of thing, their own lesson. And then one of our, I love this program, it is our Lionfish Educational Exhibit Program. So this basically, what this is for, public facilities who have an interest in conservation, ocean conservation. We try to encourage them to set up an educational lionfish exhibit. And so we do fund the exhibit. We will pay up to $2,500 for them to design and create their own exhibit. We don't do any of the work, we just pay them. So they do it all. But these are just some examples of things that, people have done. So we get a lot of aquariums, of course, and science centers and, museums and dive shops. But these are just a couple examples of different things that people have done. One facility did a lionfish made out of garbage, and it's like a statue out front of their facility, and it's really cool. I don't have a picture of it, I'm so sorry. And then we have a couple harvest reimbursement programs. So we used to only have the recreational one. We did split it into recreational and commercial. So for the commercial program, this is because there is a commercial market for lionfish. People can sell their lionfish and, you know, to like a wholesale dealer and get paid for harvesting lionfish. And so what we do is we just offer them a little bit more money to be able to harvest lionfish. So they can sell their lionfish normally and then submit that information to us, and then we will pay them for their a little extra for their harvest. And then on the recreational side, this is for the people who don't sell their lionfish commercially. This is more so intended for like charter captains. So we would, we ask them to take people out on lionfish specific trips and teach people how to harvest lionfish, and take them out just for lionfish. And then what we do is we reimburse them. They have to get at least 8 fish per diver, and then they'll get $50 per diver. So it's a good little business. We have quite a few people who have kind of went solely into just our programs to make a living, so must not be doing too bad. And then we offer assistance for lionfish tournaments. So this is going to be, if there's a lionfish specific tournament, they get a little bit more money. Otherwise, if there's just a fishing tournament with a lionfish category, we will pay them a little bit less money. But this just basically helps, offset the cost of advertising and pretty much whatever they wish to do with it. But we really try to encourage harvesting lionfish, and it's expensive to do all of this kind of stuff. So we hope that this is a good way to kind of offset those costs. And as you can see just from this table, I know it's numbers, but over the years, thousands and thousands of lionfish have been removed from Florida waters because of these tournaments that we have helped fund. And then one of our biggest events of the year, which I know those red letters are not fun to see, is our Lionfish Removal and Awareness Day. It's our biggest day of the year. It's a big weekend, actually. And there is a tournament associated with it. That's the Emerald Coast Open Tournament. And basically, it's usually in Destin, and there are booths everywhere, like conservation booths, art, food. There's activities, there's information, obviously, a lot of conservation information. And it's just a big giant tournament where anyone can come and have a good time, learn about lionfish, try lionfish, and then with the tournament, we don't really handle that, but there are different categories. Obviously, as you can see, most smallest and largest lionfish, and they win prizes for that. And but this year's has been canceled. It was supposed to be in May. We pushed it to September. It's supposed to be in like 2 weeks. But it did end up getting canceled because of COVID, which was a bummer. But we were able to extend our main incentive program that's going on right now, which I'm about to tell you about. And this is the Lionfish Challenge. So I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this, but okay, cool. So if you do go down to the Keys and you are able to harvest any lionfish, you definitely should sign up for the Lionfish Challenge. It is awesome. It's going to run until November 1st. You can register at any time. And basically what we do is we just really try to encourage people to get out there and harvest as many lionfish as they can. And so with this one, there is a winner in the end. There's a recreational and commercial category. So the recreational, they both have to get the most lionfish, and then they get crowned the king or queen. But to encourage other people to harvest lionfish, the people who might not be able to get as many as these people who are harvesting 1,000 lionfish, we have different tiers. So to qualify for the challenge, you only have to harvest 20 lionfish. And then we have different tiers after that. So once you get to 50 lionfish, you get a prize, and 100 you get a prize, and 200 you get another prize, and it goes up and up. And it is awesome. It was supposed to end in September this month with the Lionfish Removal and Awareness Day, but since that got canceled, we decided to extend the Lionfish Challenge out until November. And already with the challenge since May 22nd, our participants have harvested over 12,000 lionfish just within the past couple months. So it's the most, this is the most participation we've ever had so far, and the most lionfish removed so far, which is why we're guessing their populations are coming back as well, because we are definitely seeing a lot more of them. But it's still good, we're still getting them. But if you are interested in that, you can find all the information at the website on the bottom of this slide. Our Reef Rangers page, that's where you register, and you can learn everything there is to know. Or you can ask me. My contact information will be at the end. And sometimes it's easier to just talk to somebody than to read it online. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. And then lastly, I know when I was here a couple months ago with you guys and I got introduced, someone asked for lionfish recipes. I don't personally have any, but Reef makes this lionfish cookbook. And so I've added the website on here for that, but it has a ton of awesome lionfish recipes in it. And then I think this is their second edition. So there's even a first edition. So you have 2 books full of recipes. And then I just selected a few of the counties kind of near you guys down there, and different restaurants that we have on file that serve lionfish. So if you don't feel like cooking and you just want to go out and try it, you know, granted, if any of these places are open right now, these are all restaurants in your area that serve lionfish. They might not serve it all the time, but they do, you know, at least serve it during the season. Probably down in the Keys, they serve it all the time. But there is a whole list of restaurants as well in Florida on our website. So for those of you that aren't in the southern region, you still have some options. And this is just my contact information. So my email is just jessica.valek@myfwc. You can also contact our lionfish email. That goes to me too. So that's lionfish@myfwc. And then also our 2 websites. We have our Reef Rangers website. That is where we like to really promote our different programs that we have. And then the My FWC Lionfish page, that's going to be more of the educational side of lionfish. And then if you are on Facebook, definitely follow our Reef Rangers page. I do manage that, and I try to keep it fun and updated, and we like to do little facts and updates about the challenge and everything. And it's just a really good way, if you do want to participate in any of our programs, it is a really good way to be, you know, in the loop and know what's going on and get your updates. And then lastly, this is the video with all the lionfish. So as you can see, there are lionfish everywhere. And this is from a couple years ago. So, you know, like I said, we hadn't been seeing as many lionfish on reefs over the past couple years, but this was when their populations were really bad. You know, there are at least 100 lionfish on this reef, and that little wreck is not very big. So you can see just, they're not really moving, they're not afraid, they're just hanging out. And even once one gets, you know, speared, the other ones don't have that sense of fear to run away, like, oh, my buddy just got speared, I should swim away. So lionfish are fairly stupid. But I will say, over the past couple years, there have been a lot more reports of people who are seeing a little bit more skittish lionfish. So maybe they're learning. But yeah, as you can see, there's not much else around this reef for fish. There's a couple probably snapper right there, and you see a big grouper swim by. But other than that, you're not really seeing any of the juveniles or the ones, you know, that are like hiding out in the reef. It's mainly dominated by lionfish. And this will play on a loop. So once it finishes, I will pause it. But you'll see the diver here show her full zookeeper. And then she shows her, I know, yep, 6 minutes. It only took 6 minutes to fill that whole thing with lionfish. And just depending on, you know, how large your zookeeper is or how large the fish are, there's really no like limit on, I mean, there is a limit on how much a zookeeper can hold, but there's no really good estimate for how many lionfish a zookeeper can hold. It just all depends on the size of lionfish that you're getting. But yeah, I can let this play out if you guys want. It'll play on a loop, so it'll just continue. Otherwise, I can stop it. Adele, you're muted.
Jessica, thank you very, very much. That was really, really interesting. And I want to let people know a couple things. First of all, I'm going to open the Tiki Bar, and I'm going to stop the recording right now.